When we picture World War II, it's easy to imagine the grand machinery of war tanks grinding forward, aircraft roaring through the skies, soldiers fully armed and outfitted by the might of their nations. But the truth on the ground was far harsher. Supplies didn't always arrive. Weapons jammed. Engines failed. Tools wore out faster than they could be replaced. And in the chaos of battlefields that stretched from scorching desert dunes to frozen Russian plains, men couldn't afford to wait. They survived not through perfect equipment, but through relentless improvisation, through the quiet, gritty art of repairing the unrepairable and reimagining the useless. What rose from the rubble was some of the most resourceful and ingenious field repairs in the long history of war. Scrap became lifelines. Broken gear became tools. Abandoned metal gained new purpose. Nothing existed for a single job not when your life depended on turning every object into something more. Take the bayonet, a simple piece of steel meant for close combat. In reality, it became a multi-purpose survival tool. Soldiers honed broken blades into compact trench, knives better suited for close quarters fighting in shattered cities and narrow dugouts. Others ground the edges into flat screwdrivers, tent stakes, and even makeshift trowels for digging in frozen earth. Some men, pressed by hunger and limited rations, held the flat of their bayonets over small flames to fry slivers of meat, turning a weapon into a cooking surface. It revealed something powerful about a soldier's mindset. When nothing could be wasted, everything had to work twice as hard. Vehicles, essential to mobility, suffered endlessly under brutal conditions. Engines overheated, armor split, and parts vanished into the desert sand or the muddy chaos of the Eastern Front. Mechanics found salvation in the wreckage around them. Bent armor scraps were hammered into crude engine covers. Destroyed tank panels became makeshift transmission plates or patchwork armor for fragile trucks. In North Africa, crews scavenged aluminum from crashed aircraft and refashioned it into radiator fins and fuel tank covers. A good welder could resurrect a vehicle thought too damaged to save, giving a unit the precious mobility it needed to escape an ambush or reinforce a distant position. Rifles, a soldier's most vital companion, weren't immune to ruin. Stocks cracked from recoil, barrels clogged with mud, and sand chewed at every moving part. Field repairs bordered on desperation. Soviet infantrymen wrapped broken Mosin-Nagant stocks with wire, cloth, or strips of leather torn from their own boots, creating grips strong enough to fire again. In the Pacific, Marines wound canvas around their barrels to keep out sand and salt. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't perfect, but in the middle of combat, good enough to fire often meant the difference between life and death. Even helmets, dented and battered, refused to become trash. Soldiers repurposed shattered shells into cooking pots, water buckets, or crude digging tools. German and Soviet troops were known to carry hot coals inside damaged helmets to warm their positions in freezing weather. Others used them to bail water from flooded foxholes. A helmet that could no longer stop shrapnel might still keep a man alive in a dozen other ways. Mobility depended on tires. Yet tires were constantly shredded by debris and terrain. Mechanics stitched together patchwork repairs using scavenged rubber, strips of leather, or layers of tar-soaked canvas. In the desert, entire sections of destroyed tires were cut and restitched into rough replacements. Soviet partisans, isolated deep behind enemy lines, sometimes stuffed tires with straw or cloth to create solid wheels far from ideal, but enough to haul ammunition, food, and wounded comrades through the forest. When supplies were scarce, functionality mattered more than perfection. Even the wreckage of Wartha, very shrapnel meant to kill, became a resource. Soldiers shaped jagged fragments into knife blades, spear tips, small hatchets, and even parts for traps. Resistance fighters in occupied territories relied on these improvised blades for daily survival, gutting animals or carving defensive stakes. German troops forged bomb shards into axe heads using makeshift field forges. Metal designed for destruction was transformed into the tools of endurance. Communication, the backbone of every coordinated movement, often depended on miracles in the field. Radios cracked, wires snapped, and batteries died at the worst possible moments. Operators learned to cannibalize anything for part stripping copper wire from destroyed vehicles or torn apart headphones. Some created improvised batteries using acid from vehicle cells. carefully preserved to power field sets. Resistance groups crafted antennas from scrap wire and steel rods, extending the reach of their messages far beyond what the original devices allowed. These repairs often improvised under enemy fire kept squads connected, informed, and alive. Medical supplies were constantly depleted. Medics, working under fire and short on equipment, transformed everyday objects into life-saving tools. Bent spoons became splints for broken fingers. Damaged canteens were cut into makeshift braces for wounded limbs. Shrapnel, once sterilized, served as emergency scalpels. Torn uniforms became bandages, and disinfectant was scavenged from alcohol distilled out of vehicle fuel. Crude, yes, but often enough to stabilize a soldier long enough for evacuation. What ties all these repairs together is a single, unbreakable principle: survival through adaptation. Soldiers, mechanics, partisans, and civilians learned to see value where others saw junk. A broken rifle wasn't a loss, it was raw material. A shattered vehicle wasn't abandoned, it was reborn. The line between craftsman, medic, mechanic, and fighter disappeared. In total war, versatility wasn't an advantage, it was a requirement. And these stories carry lessons that outlast the war itself. They remind us that resilience doesn't come from perfect conditions or flawless equipment. It comes from the ability to adapt, to salvage, to create something useful from what seems hopeless. Those men didn't survive because they had the best gear, many didn't. They survived because they refused to surrender to circumstance. They endured through ingenuity, grit, and an unwavering refusal to waste anything that might still hold purpose. By remembering their field repairs, we honor not just their skills, but their spirit, the relentless determination that carried them through the harshest conflict in human history. And if you value these forgotten stories of resilience and creativity, share them, keep them alive, and carry their lessons forward. Because in every age, in every struggle, the ability to adapt remains the greatest tool of all.